Good Monday morning. I am MPJ.
And you are watching FunFunFunction. The clickbaity title of this today's video is Throw Out Your Tools. I'm going to make a case for minimalism in this video. Last week I made a pair programming video together with my friend Eric. We programmed a game using Unity. Since it's Unity, we were programming in C# in that video, and in one part of the video we talk a little bit about how neither of us use getters or setters when we programming in C#. Well, we use getters and setters, but we don't use the built-in language functionality for it. We just use normal methods. And one viewer, Arcalion5, asked, why don't you like getters and setters? Why wouldn't you use properties? They are great. They obviously add value. And this is super interesting because I totally agree that getters and setters add value. It's just that I don't think they add enough value. I like to use as few tools as possible, and I think that for me, adding one more tool to my tool chain, I consider that to be a pretty high cost. So that tool will need to come with a pretty high value for me to accept it into my tool chain. And for me, getters and setters are to me they're just syntactic sugar. They don't add that much value. In this discussion, I don't think there's a clear right or wrong. Several people in the discussion didn't agree with me. They thought that adding one more property accessor was definitely that added value and that it was definitely worth it. So I just want to make clear that there are varying opinions on this matter, but I would like to make a case for mine today, which is a kind of extreme minimalism. I don't think that my opinion is the end-all be-all of opinions on this matter, but I do think that we as an industry could use a little bit more of this. If you've been following this channel for a while, you know about me that I don't use a lot of tooling. Many people ask me what editor I use, and so I eventually made a video about that called, it was titled, What Editor Do You Use? You can find it in the episode description. And the TLDR is basically that I use Atom without any plugins at all. I do this because I'm a kind of recovering tooling alcoholic. I just can't handle the distraction of a complicated tool. If you want to know more about that, you can find the video in the episode description. But in this video, I'm going to make a case for less libraries, less language features, and features in general, really. Less plugins, less build tools, less, and less. It goes without saying that I'm not referencing the CSS framework less, which is ironically one more tool. I did not start out thinking this way. I'm going to tell you a story about me, a very embarrassing story. I used to be a person, I really liked stuff. You know, gadgets and cell phones and computers and that kind of stuff. I still do, we all do, but back then I really had this conviction that the person with the most stuff when they die wins. And in my early 20s, I ran a company, and when it comes to money, I am a person that is very good at making money, but very bad at taking care of that money when it's there. And when you're running a business, you kind of have to be good at both of those things. So in a couple of years, I managed to tank this company completely and also amass a very sizable tax debt to boot. This was definitely the economic low point of my life. So the way things work, if you have a tax debt that you cannot pay, the Swedish equivalent of the IRS will, they can get a seizure order for your things, basically. So I'm not sure what the organization is called in other countries, but in Sweden it's called Kronofogden. And what they do is that if you can't pay your debts, they have the legal right to come to you and seize your assets and sell them on your behalf to pay your debts for you. So at this point, I just figured that I would be proactive and sell my stuff first, because I figured I would do a better job than them. So what I did was that I basically sold everything I owned that had remotely any value. So Xbox, expensive computers, whatever, you name it. Got rid of so much stuff. I basically liquidated everything I could into cash and just crammed that towards the tax debt. In practice, the seizure order never happened. I spent a couple of years working as a consultant and paying the tax debt off using just my salary. But accidentally, that liquidation of all of that stuff turned out to be one of the best things that have ever happened to me. Getting rid of all that stuff turned out to be a massive relief. What I had not realized up until that point in my life is that everything you acquire, be it digital or physical for that matter, carries a little tiny amount of work with it that you have to do. If you buy a coffee grinder, you now have a new routine in your life to buy beams for it. When you upgraded from a dumb phone to an iPhone, you now have to remember to charge it every day. And whenever you get any new thing and start relying on it, that thing has a possibility of breaking down, and then you now have a new task that means that you have to go on and get it repaired. And none of these tasks are very big in themselves, so it generally doesn't, it's very invisible. But once I got rid of all that stuff at one fell swoop, it dawned on me how big the amassed amount of work from all of those things that I had, how big that chunk of time was, how much of a drain on my resources that really was. And that really changed my attitude on these kinds of things. I also want to talk about cooking. I'm gonna fetch a thing that I want to show you. You can actually follow me around because I'm trying out having a lavalier mic. I'm gonna open up my fridge and I'm gonna pick out, where is it? Here it is. I'm coming back. Wait for me. This is going to be incredibly anticlimactic. Okay. Ta-da! Fish sauce. I'm gonna talk about the fish sauce in a bit and explain how that ties into this. But first I want to talk a little bit about cooking in general, because I love cooking. It's one of the hobbies that I've picked up that are my non-programming hobbies. Cooking is the antithesis of programming, because it's very concrete. You start out doing something that is very tangible, it's very limited in time, and you end up with something real and then you eat it. It's very different from programming, which is abstract as hell, and building a software can go on forever. But there are still a lot of things that you can learn from cooking that are transferable into software development. And one of those things is mise en place, or just mise. It's French and it means everything in its place. Mise basically means that before you start cooking, you locate all the ingredients and tools that you're going to need to make the recipe, and you place them out in an orderly manner. Everything in its place. I've linked to a video in the episode description if you want to check out the concept of mise en place explained by somebody who actually knows what they're doing. Mise en place is pretty convertible to programming in itself. Like, just get all your stuff in order, like your editor and all the documentation and stuff before you start programming. It's very nice and very calming. But a very nice bonus of mise is that it gives you an overview of the complexity of the recipe. If a recipe is very complicated, just putting all the ingredients up is going to give you a sense that, oh, this recipe is going to be complicated. This recipe has a lot of parts. When a recipe has a lot of ingredients, it's almost always going to add a lot of time to the recipe, and it's also going to add more places where the recipe can go wrong because you make a mistake. Also, it's not always the number of ingredients that is the problem. It might also be things like this fish sauce. Fish sauce is super common in Thai recipes, but not generally in the food that I cook. I needed fish sauce to try a recipe recently, and I saw that I had it in my fridge, but one of them had expired last year, and another one had expired in 2013. So this is one of those ingredients that where it's in a recipe, you buy an entire bottle of it, you use like this much, and then you never use it again. So I mostly like cooking simple recipes, and by simple I mean recipes with few ingredients, but not only few, but also as generic as possible, non-specialized. Ingredients that I can use over and over again in many different courses, but combined in different ways. The advantage of this is that it becomes less costly because it's just less food waste, which in turn of course allows you to buy more high quality ingredients with the same amount of money. And when you have fewer ingredients, that means that you generally have less steps, which means that you can spend more care on every step, so you improve your cooking that way too. Italian cooking is a lot like that. It's a very few ingredients in very non-weird combination, and it's heavily focused on good produce and good quality meat as a basis for the cooking rather than interesting taste combinations. That's a lot of talking about me and cooking, and how does this fall back into programming? Well, one of the main jobs of a programmer is to manage complexity. Building software means that you build new features over time, things get added and added and added, and the complexity basically just grows, and it's up to you as a programmer to keep this complexity beast going for as long as possible, basically. And the way we do this is to find ways to make it possible to reason about our code in a somewhat sane manner. This is not my opinion. This is actually important for reals in order to build software. Because when it comes to complexity, like we all have, as human beings and programmers, we all have a different level of capability when it comes to handling complexity. Some programmers can't really keep much of it in their heads at the same time and require quite a bit of simplicity, and some programmers are very good at keep like 5 or perhaps 10 things in their mind at the same time, so they handle complexity better. But it's kind of like juggling. There is a person, like most people can juggle 2 balls easily, and some people can that are professional jugglers and have done it for many years they can do like 10 balls, but nobody can do 100 balls. Therefore, it's absolutely crucial that everybody knows how to build systems that makes it a lot easier to reason about our code. We can't solve it by just hiring smarter programmers. If you like thinking more about that, there is this amazing talk by a guy called Rich Hickey that I've talked about before, called Simple Made Easy. It's definitely one of the top 5 best talks ever on computer science and programming. I've linked to it in the episode description. There are many ways to make it easier to reason about your code. Divide and conquer is one of the more common ones, breaking things into modules and just making sure that you can think about one problem at a time. But another way that I think is heavily underrated is one that I'm making a case for today, which is basically throwing out tools. Use fewer language features, use less libraries, try to find ways of accomplishing the same thing but with less moving parts involved. A lot of people misunderstand me when I talk about this, so I want to talk about thrashing versus sacrifice. So a lot of people think that, oh, okay, yeah, we should really clean up all the dead code in our projects, but that's not what I'm talking about. Like that's thrashing. If I find, like just trash on my floor and I throw that away into the bin, then I'm not simplifying my life in any way. I'm just cleaning. It's just thrashing. Sacrifice, on the other hand, that means actually throwing out things that have value, that you like a lot, that pains you to remove, and that will piss people off if you remove them. It means stuff like selling your TV because you don't want to spend more time watching TV in your life because you find that it has become a waste for you. So when I'm talking about throwing out your tools, I'm not talking about just trashing things that you don't use. I'm talking about actual sacrifice. I'm talking about removing things that you actually find valuable, but that you are willing to sacrifice in order to create a simpler, cohesive whole. I am going to give you a great example of this being done in the wild, and it was just recently by Create React app. If you don't know what Create React app is, it's a boilerplate app, basically an app skeleton that allows you to get going with React really, really quickly without any fuzz. Create React app is zero configuration. It gets you going right away. It's well tested on many platforms, and if something breaks down, the configuration is the same for everyone else, so you're very likely to get help on the internet. It's just great. But in order to get there, they had to sacrifice. And one of the most controversial things that they sacrificed was source maps. Now, source maps, when they work, they are amazing. You have your original JavaScript code written in ES6 or CoffeeScript or TypeScript or whatever. It's transpiled down to ECMAScript 5 run in a browser, and there's some error, but even though that code is transpiled, you will get the correct stack trace on the correct lines corresponding to your original code. Like magic. That's source maps. They are so good. But Create React app does not have source maps because source maps do not work all that well. They break down a lot. There's a lot of... They did not feel like if we want to create this this cohesive experience that gives people a predictable, out-of-the-box experience that, just works and lets people start getting work done, source maps does not fit into that cohesive picture. I really love source maps, but I really respect Create React app for making this decision, because they are able to do that because they know exactly what they are building, so they are able to do this sacrifice. Another problem with having many ingredients in your software is that more moving parts means that there are more parts that can break, and therefore more things will break. Another hidden cost with using third-party tools is that you need to stay up to date. New versions of these components are released all the time, and you could elect not to do the updates, but then you are partly exposing yourself to any vulnerability that is known and out there, or your documentation will simply go stale because the documentation online will be for the new version of the software while you're on the old one, so it will be even harder to manage. If you have many moving parts and many tools and stuff in your project, it's going to affect how accessible your project is to pick up for other programmers. Might necessarily not make it worse, might be actually make it better if it's a very well-known component that you're using, but often it affects it negatively. For instance, Redux. Redux is an amazing pattern, but let's be honest, when you start learning Redux, it's like this rabbit hole of things that you have to learn. The documentation is like, okay, we are now going to teach you what action creators are. Then we go down the documentation. Here we're using this thing, which is a new thing. It's a simple plugin that you can just pull from here. You can read about it here. And then you start reading about that thing. And then you realize that that thing uses another thing. That's like, it's just, it takes a lot of time. It's far from straightforward to learn, even especially if you use meta frameworks like Redux, Saga and stuff. It really impacts the way your application will be received by a new programmer coming into the project, especially if that programmer is not a JavaScript developer. So if we're going back to the original thing, the property accessors in C#, it could be argued that using C# accessors is idiomatic to C#. Like it's what that means is that it's the way you do things in C#. It's the natural way of doing things. And that is true. So maybe if you're doing C#, well, when in Rome, you should code C# the way Romans do. And the same could go for Redux. It's functional, it takes JavaScript in a nice direction, it's definitely idiomatic. But it definitely does make it harder for a programmer not familiar with that language or that platform to move into it. So we're using tooling that is very specialized for this language, this domain, so to speak, instead of using tools that have a tendency to overlap with other parts of the industry. I'm not saying that we shouldn't be idiomatic. It's nice in many ways, but I think that at least we need to be aware that there is a backside to idiomatic. And these things, they kind of feed on themselves, because if you are very familiar with a platform, the amount of cognitive load that you can handle, as a JavaScript developer, you just, I can handle these functional things, I can handle like another Redux plugin, sure, I can throw that on, JavaScript is all I do, so I can do this all day. But if we want developers to be able to move between different platforms and do a lot of things like iOS development or Android and perhaps backend development and front-end development in JavaScript, like if we want developers to be able to help out in many parts of the organization, then it's a very bad thing if people start using a lot of specialized tooling for their part of the tool chain that only they know about. Because it creates these tech apartheids between us, and people will start to create tools like Yeoman. Like, I understand that people use Yeoman, I really do, and I understand that a lot of people spend time making Yeoman, but I just hate Yeoman, I really do. I find it insane. Like, the person that created Yeoman, like, I can't fathom that thinking process. So they have so many tools. They have so much a setup for their project that is so complex that they had to create a meta tool to manage their overly complicated tool set. It's like a person that has 2,000 shoes at home. It does not occur to this person that they might have a problem collecting shoes. No, they decide to build a shoe sorting robot. I think this is crazy. It's a personal opinion, don't kill me too much. I've been ranting a lot. I'm not saying that you shouldn't use tools. Of course we need to use tools. It would be insane. I mean, you can't make food with just flour. It's just, well, you can, but it's not very good. We need some balance. But I think that it's fair to say that you should ask yourself twice before adding a tool or ingredient to your software development process or your project. Next time you're about to add a new library or start using a new feature in your project, a language feature that was not previously used, ask yourself, does this add a lot of value to my project? And that is because if you get into the habit of adding things just because they have some value, you're going to end up with a lot of complexity over time. But that is just me. What do you think? Did this video make you think of an ingredient in your software development process that you could live without, or maybe one that you couldn't live without, or maybe you think I'm just full of shit, please leave a comment down below. You have just watched an episode of FunFunFunction. I release these every Monday morning, 0800 GMT. Do not miss out on the next one. I am MPJ. Until next Monday morning, stay curious.